Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sri Krishnaya Paramatmane Namaha. Srimad Bhagavat Gita, Chapter 6. Dhyaana, Abhyaasa, Yoga. Sri Bhagavan said, "He who does his duty without expecting the fruit of actions is a sannyasi and a yogi both. He is no sannyasi who has merely renounced the sacred fire. Even so, he is no yogi who has merely given up all activities. Arjuna, you must know that what they call sannyasa is no other than yoga. For none becomes a yogi who has not abandoned his sankalpas, thoughts of the world. To the contemplative soul who desires to attain karma yoga, selfless action is said to be the means. For the same man, when he is established in yoga, absence of all sankalpas, that is, thoughts of the world, is said to be the way to blessedness. When a man ceases to have any attachment for the objects of senses and for actions and has renounced all sankalpas, he is said to have attained yoga. One should lift oneself by one's own efforts and should not degrade oneself. For one's own self is one's friend and one's own self is one's enemy. One's own self is the friend of the soul by whom the lower self, consisting of the mind, senses and body, has been conquered. Even so, the very self of him who has not conquered his lower self behaves antagonistically like an enemy. The Supreme Spirit is rooted in the knowledge of the self-controlled man whose mind is perfectly serene in the midst of pairs of opposites such as cold and heat, joy and sorrow, and honor and ignominy. The yogi whose mind is sated with Dhyaana, knowledge of Nirguna Brahma, and Vijnana, knowledge of manifest divinity, who is unmoved under any circumstances, whose senses are completely under control, and to whom earth, stone, and gold are all alike, is spoken of as a God-realized soul. He who looks upon well-wishers and neutrals, as well as mediators, friends and foes, relatives and inimicals, the virtuous and the sinful with equanimity, stands supreme. Living in seclusion all by himself, the yogi who has controlled his mind and body and is free from desires and void of possessions should constantly engage his mind in meditation. Having set his seat in a spot which is free from dirt and other impurities, with the sacred kusha grass, a deer skin and a cloth spread thereon, one upon the other, neither very high nor very low, and occupying that seat, concentrating the mind and controlling the functions of the mind and senses, he should practice yoga for self-purification. Holding the trunk, head and neck straight and steady, remaining firm and fixing the gaze at the root of his nose without looking in other directions. Firm in the vow of complete chastity and fearless, keeping himself perfectly calm and with the mind held in restraint and fixed on me, the vigilant yogi should sit absorbed in me. Thus, constantly applying his mind to me, the yogi of disciplined mind attains everlasting peace consisting of supreme bliss, which abides in me. Arjuna, this yoga is neither for him who overeats, nor for him who observes complete fast. It is neither for him who is given up too much sleep, or who is given to too much sleep. Yoga, which rids one of who, is accomplished by him who is regulated in diet and recreation, regulated in performing actions, and regulated in sleep and wakefulness. When the mind, which is thoroughly disciplined, gets riveted on God alone, then the person who is free from yearning for all enjoyments is said to be established yoga. As a flame does not flicker in a windless place, such is stated to be the picture of the disciplined mind of the yogi practicing meditation on God. The state in which, curbed through the practice of yoga, the mind becomes still, and in which, realizing God through subtle reason, the soul rejoices only in God. Nay, in which the soul experiences the eternal and super sensuous joy, which can be intuited only through the subtle and purified intellect, and wherein established the said yogi moves not from truth on any account, and having obtained which he does not reckon any other gain as greater than that, and established in which he is not shaken even by the heaviest of sorrows. That state called yoga, which is free from the contact of sorrow, should be known. Nay, this yoga should be resolutely practiced with an unvaried mind, completely renouncing all desires arising from thoughts of the world, and fully restraining the whole pack of the senses from all sides by the mind. He should, through gradual practice, attain tranquility, and fixing the mind on God through reason controlled by steadfastness, he should not think of anything else. Drawing back the restless and fidgety mind from all those objects after which it runs, he should repeatedly fix it on God. For to the yogi whose mind is perfectly serene, who is sinless, whose passion is subdued, and who is identified with Brahman, the embodiment of truth, knowledge and bliss, supreme happiness comes as a matter of course. The sinless yogi, thus uniting his self constantly with God, easily enjoys the eternal bliss of oneness with Brahman. The yogi who is united in identity with the all-pervading infinite consciousness, whose vision everywhere is even, beholds the self existing in all beings and all beings as assumed in the self. He who sees me present in all beings and all being existing within me, he is never lost to me, nor am I ever lost to him. The yogi who is established in union with me and worships me as residing in all beings as their very self, does all his activities with me. Arjuna, he who looks on all as one, on the analogy of his own self, and looks upon the joy and sorrow of all equally, such a yogi is deemed to be the highest of all. Arjuna said, Krishna, owing to restlessness of mind, I do not perceive the stability of this yoga in the form of equanimity, which you have just spoken of. For Krishna, the mind is very unsteady, turbulent, tenacious, and powerful. Therefore, I consider it as difficult to control as the wind. Sri Bhagavan said, the mind is restless, no doubt, and difficult to curb, Arjuna. but it can be brought under control by repeated practice of meditation and by the exercise of dispassion, O son of Kunti. Yoga is difficult of achievement for one whose mind is not subdued by him. However, who has the mind under control and is ceaselessly striving, it can be easily attained through practice. Such is my conviction. Arjuna said, Krishna, what becomes of the soul who, though endowed with faith, has not been able to subdue his passions and whose mind is therefore diverted from yoga at the time of death and who thus fails to reach perfection in yoga? Krishna swerved from the path leading to God realization, and without anything to stand upon, is he not lost like the scattered cloud, deprived of both God realization and heavenly enjoyment? Krishna, only you are capable to remove this doubt of mine completely, for none other than you can dispel this doubt. Sri Bhagavan said, Dear Arjuna, there is no fall for him either here or hereafter. For none who strives for self-redemption ever meets with evil destiny. Such a person who has strayed from yoga obtains the higher worlds, to which men of meritorious deeds alone are entitled, and having resided there for innumerable years, takes birth of pious and prosperous parents. Or, if he is possessed of dispassion, he is born in the family of enlightened yogis. But such a birth is in this world very difficult to obtain. Arjuna, he automatically regains in that birth the spiritual insight of his previous birth. And through that he strives harder than ever for perfection in the form of God realization. The other one who takes birth in a rich family, though under the sway of his senses, feels drawn towards God by force of the habit acquired in his previous birth. Nay, even the seeker of enlightenment on yoga transcends the fruit of actions performed with some interested motive as laid down in the Vedas. The yogi, however, who diligently takes up the practice attains perfection in this very life with the help of latencies of many births, and being thoroughly purged of sin, forthwith reaches the supreme state. The yogi is superior to the ascetics. He is regarded superior even to those versed in sacred lore. The yogi is also superior to those who perform action with some interested motive. Therefore, Arjuna, do become a yogi. Of all yogis, again, he who devoutly worships me with his mind focused on me is considered by me to be the best yogi. Thus, in the Upanishad sung by the Lord, the science of Brahman, the scripture of yoga, the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna ends the 6th chapter entitled The Yoga of Self-Control. The glories of chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita from Padma Purana. Lord Shiva said, Now I will tell you the glories of the 6th chapter of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Whoever hears this description will be liberated from the material world. On the bank of Godavari river, there is a beautiful town of the name Pratishtanpur, Paitan, where I am famous by the name Pipalesh. In that town, there was a king of the name Janshruti, whom the people loved very much and whose qualities were unlimited. He performed daily fire sacrifices, which were so opulent and large that the smoke from them reached the heavenly pleasure garden known as Nandavan, and made the leaves of the Kalpavriksha trees black. Those trees appeared as if they were offering their respects to King Janshruti. Due to the pious activities of that great king, demigods always resided in Pratishtanpur. When Janshruti would give charity, he would distribute just as the clouds distribute the rain. Due to Janshruti's pure religious activities, rain always come at the right time, and the fields were always full of crops, which were not disturbed by the 6 types of rodents. He was always digging wells and lakes for the welfare of citizens. The demigods, being very pleased with Janashruti, went to his palace in the form of swans to bless him. They were flying through the sky, one behind the other, talking together. Bhadrashva, along with 2 or 3 other swans, flew ahead of the rest. At that time, the other swans addressed Bhadrashva, "Oh brother, why are you flying ahead? Do you not see in front of you the great king Janashruti, who is so powerful that he can burn up his enemies by his desire?" When Bhadrashva heard the words of other swans, he started to laugh and said, "Oh brothers, is this king Janashruti as powerful as the great sage Raigva?" When the king heard the words of swans, he immediately came down from the roof of his high palace and happily sat on his throne. At that time, he called his chariot driver and instructed him to go and find the great sage Raikwa. When the chariot driver of the name Maha heard the king's instructions, he became very happy and left immediately to search out Raikwa. First, he traveled to Kashipuri, where Lord Vishwanath resides, for the welfare of all beings. Next, he went to Gaya, where the lotus-eyed god Gadadhara, who is capable of freeing all beings from bondage of birth and death, stays. After having traveled to many holy places, he came to Mathura, which is capable of destroying all sins. In this place, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, resides. All of the great sages, demigods, also the Vedas and other Shastras in their personal forms, perform austerities and render service to Lord Krishna. Mathura, which is in the shape of a half moon and is situated on the bank of the beautiful devotion-giving river Jamuna, in that area is the beautiful Govardhana hill, which adds to the splendor and glory of Mathura Mandala like a large jewel in a crown. It is surrounded by pure trees and creepers. There are 12 wonderful forests surrounding Mathura, in which Lord Krishna enjoys his wonderful pastimes. After leaving Mathura, Maha traveled to the west and then to the north. One day he came to a town known as Kashmir, in which he saw a very large and shining white place. At that place, all of the people, even the foolish men, looked as beautiful demigods due to the fact that many sacrificial fires were burning continuously. It looked as if a row of clouds always hung over the town. The deity of Lord Shiva, known as Manikeshwara, resided in that town. The king of Kashmir had just returned from defeating many kings and was engaged in worshipping Lord Shiva. Due to his great devotion to Lord Shiva, that king was known as Manikeshwar. Just close to the door of the temple, sitting on a small cart underneath a tree, Maha saw the great sage Raikwa. When he recognized Raikwa from the description of Janashruti, he immediately fell at his feet and inquired from him, "O great sage, where do you live? And what is your full name? You are such a highly elevated person. Why are you sitting in this place?" When Raikwa heard the words of Maha, he thought for some time and replied, "I am fully satisfied. I do not require anything." When Maha heard his reply, in his heart he could understand everything. He immediately left on the long journey back to Pratishtanpur. When he reached his destination, he immediately went and offered his respects to the king, and with folded hands informed the king of all the events which had taken place. After the king had heard everything from Maha, he decided to leave at once to take the darshan of the great sage Raikwa. Sitting in a beautiful chariot and taking with him many valuable gifts, he left for Kashmir. When he reached the place where the sage Raikwa was staying, he fell at his feet and placed the entire valuable silks and jewels which he had brought with him before Raikwa. At that time, the great sage Raikwa became very angry. He said, "O foolish king, you take these useless things and put them in your chariot and leave from this place." The king immediately, with great devotion, fell at the feet of Raikwa and begged his forgiveness, asking him to be merciful upon him. He inquired from Raikwa, "O sage, how have you attained such a high state of renunciation and devotion to the Lord?" Becoming pleased with king's submissive attitude, Raikwa replied, "Daily I recite the 6th chapter of Srimad Bhagavat Gita." After that, King Janashruti heard from Raikwa the 6th chapter of Srimad Bhagavat Gita, and thereafter he engaged in daily reciting that 6th chapter. And in the course of time, a flower aeroplane arrived and took him to Vaikuntha. Meanwhile, that great sage who was reciting the 6th chapter of Srimad Bhagavat Gita daily went to Vaikuntha, where he engaged in the service of lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Anyone who recites the 6th chapter of Srimad Bhagavat Gita will very soon attain service to the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. Of this, there is no doubt. This concludes the 6th chapter of Srimad Bhagavat Gita. Shri Krishna 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 Krishna